You mentioned earlier feminism, and I think it's really important to talk about this because whether it be first, second, or third wave feminism, and those were very different, obviously. Talk to us a little bit about the impact, and has that helped women or hurt women? Of course, I have my own thoughts on that, but
Well, I mean, you're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask, but my opinion is I don't think it's helped women. I think it's hurt society.
yeah,
I think it's now convinced, like it's at the stage where it's not really for equality. I don't think you'd find anybody out there that would argue that women can't do or have anything that men have today.
yeah,
As far as job opportunity, I mean, there's a big push to get women into boardrooms as CEOs and members of these types of levels, but there's no push to get women onto oil rigs, coal mines, and on garbage trucks.
yeah,
So it's kind of selective. It's kind of like an a la carte menu,
right.
which sort of turns it into a supremacy movement at this point, is the way that it's going, where it actually kind of aims to have women dislike men, not see them as peers, not want to be their equals, but actually want to push them down. And you've got a legal system that sort of complies with that with family law. You have a legal system that complies with that with, the whole hashtag Me Too era. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts with these mechanisms. So, I mean, like we can go down that rabbit hole. It just depends on how far you want to take your audience on that one, my friend.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. But interestingly, it seems like it has created a lot of lonely people and a culture that is just more and more detached. You talk about the government's role, and some people say the government is the new husband. And
The government is the head of the household now.
yeah,
There used to be a time where the man was the head of the household and he had responsibility to his family along with authority. Today, if you're a married man, you still have responsibility to the family financially, obviously, but you don't have any authority anymore. The government and the woman is now the head of the household. So that's just the way that things are today, and that's just the direction that we've pushed in based on all the decisions that we made and where we've gone with it all.
so if we layer into that the impact of social media,
Mhm.
uh, Instagram is the new boyfriend, but not really. It's sort of this attention reward, dopamine reward system. And this is much different for women than it is for men
Mhm.
because, uh, you know, if men post a picture on Instagram, they're not going to get 5,000 comments. Oh, you're
Right.
beautiful, you're handsome, whatever, right?
Mhm.
It just doesn't work the same way between the genders, does it?
It doesn't. And it's actually interesting because I noticed this a while ago. So I'm going to pick up my phone here. And the way that men use social media and Instagram is they'll take their phone and be like, oh, there's a nice car. Let me take a picture of that. Or there's a nice canyon over there. Let me take a picture of that. But women, on the other hand, they take the phone and they do it and they use it like this,
Yeah.
right? Because they're pointing the camera that way. So, women use it for validation and to get attention. Um, it's an addiction for a lot of women. For guys, I think they're more addicted to competitive areas like on video games. They're not so concerned with getting likes based on their latest selfie picture, whereas that seems to be the case for women. So it's used very, very differently, between the different sexes.
I remember being at a conference about 20 years ago when the job boards were gaining popularity, and Monster.com was the big job board back
Mhm.
then, right? And the talk was about how every employee now on LinkedIn, of course, basically is always up for grabs. Their resume is always online. They're always available for hire,
Mhm.
and now that's become that way where particularly women, because the genders act very differently in the way they engage with social media, are always available. And in the entrepreneurship world, you and I'm sure both, I'm sure about the software called ClickFunnels, right?
Mhm.
It's a funnel building software, and that's how you do sales, through a sales funnel.
Mhm.
And Instagram is essentially a sales funnel.
Mhm.
And it's like, can anyone even be in a relationship anymore? Because if they have a social profile and they're on Instagram and they exhibit this massive amount of narcissism where it's
Mhm.
just all these like selfie pictures,
Mhm.
it's just frankly weird. I mean, if someone looked at this, if someone time traveled from a couple decades ago and saw this, they would think, have people gone nuts? I mean, this is just like, take it out of context and Look at how weird this is, the culture we live in.
Yeah, it is weird. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because one of the things that I talk to a lot of guys about, especially when they're contemplating a relationship or if they're contemplating inviting a woman into their life as a mother and, forming a family, is one of the conversations you have to have when she comes at you and says, hey, Jason, where do we stand? I want to be exclusive with you. I don't want to share you, blah, 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 sort of thing. That's the point where you need to take a look at her social presence. And if she's the kind of gal that has a Instagram and she posts selfies, provocative selfies, of herself on a very regular basis on a public social media site, you have to have that conversation and say, look, I dig your vibe too, but I don't get into relationships with women that behave this way. So if you want to be with me, this is something that you're going to have to give up. And that's a choice that she'll have to make. If she sees him as her hypergamous best option, if she sees him as the guy that she wants to be with, then she'll abandon that. If she doesn't, then she'll probably push back and say something like, oh, you're controlling. Why are you jealous? That's whatever, right? So yeah, it's an interesting time, and it's a conversation our parents certainly didn't have to have with our mothers.
Yeah, no question about it. Explain hypergamy, if you would.
Yeah, it's just it's a feature of women's dating strategy. It's not a bug. It's something that evolutionary psychology has discussed for decades now, and all that it really means is that women prefer to settle for men of greater value than themselves. So women date across and up on the socioeconomic hierarchy, which is why you'll see Kevin, who's the VP of the accounting department at a large company, marry a woman that might be a $45,000 a year hairdresser. It's pretty common. It's actually one of the things that my divorce lawyer brought to my attention well over a decade ago when we were having our conversations. And, he did mention that it's very, very, very rare that he sees divorce cases where Mr. makes less money than Mrs. Right. Mr. is always, the guy that's usually got a higher ranking job, and she's making a lot less money, doesn't have the same skill set, but that's because women marry across and up. And I said that's a feature, not a bug, because women have always been that way, because if they weren't that way, then their offspring wouldn't have a very good chance to survive. You go back 1,000 years, if she made a mate choice and got pregnant by the loser of the tribe, who didn't have any resources, who couldn't hunt, who couldn't provide, who couldn't protect the family, it would spell certain death. So that still happens today, but it looks a little bit different in the sexual marketplace, because women don't really need protection. There's the police force, there's the military. Women don't really need a man for money because they can go to work. But they still prefer to date across and up, which is why one of the complaints a lot of the gals have today, a lot of these professional women that have, gone and chased excellence, and they've got their degrees, and they're 35 years old, is
they're making good money.
They're making great money. They're making $100,000, $200,000 a year, and they're having a very, very hard time finding a guy that is willing to, marry them and start a family with them. But what they fail to realize is the guys that they're looking at, the 35, 40, 45-year-old guys, are looking at women as beauty objects, because that's the difference between men and women. Men see women as beauty objects, and women see men as success objects. So again, women are hypergamous. They look up at guys, whereas men look at beauty because they're looking at women for fertility reasons. So these guys around their age or a little bit older are generally dating younger women, especially if they're successful and they got their head screwed on right.
Yeah. It's interesting how sort of incongruous the genders are in terms of what they're looking for, right? That is,
they're complementary, and they've always been complementary. It's just that the way society is sort of moving today, it's masculinizing more women and it's feminizing more guys. So there's a pretty big divide. So what you were talking about earlier at the start of the show is, there's going to be more households with 2 toasters and 2 couches, and probably kids moving back and forth, or in some cases, scenarios where it's just a single parent household and one parent is just moving their resources to the other parent. So that's where we are today, but I don't know where they're going to go with that. Like, how are they going to double down and split that scenario so that they can double up on, tax revenue and, job creation, all that stuff. You really can't go very much farther after you split up the family.
Yeah. They've already sort of maximized that. Unfortunately, it's
child labor. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to have 9-year-olds with their own houses and couches and toasters. Who knows what they're going to try next?
Maybe those kids have rights, they, who knows?
I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe subscribe over here, and pinned down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.